Good morning, YouTube. So in this video I wanted to talk a bit about the 12 volt wiring that I want to do in the back of the 4Runner. A long time ago I had installed, I think, about 3 12 volt lighter sockets in the bed. These were fed from a fuse block up in the engine bay, ran back to all 3 of the sockets. So I put that in probably in the early 2000s. At the time it did the job. I didn't have all that much stuff that I needed to power back there. I used one for my AC power inverter. I had a small AC power inverter that had a 12 volt plug on it. The only problem with that is it was a 300 watt inverter, and there's no way you can get 300 watts out of a lighter plug, because that's like 30 amps, and you're probably doing good if you can get 10 amps through one of these. Around the same time, I'd also installed dual batteries in the 4Runner. So I had a primary and auxiliary battery. They were both about 26 amp hours capacity, and the way they worked is I had a 200 amp solenoid that connected both batteries in parallel when the ignition power was turned on. So as soon as you turned the key on, solenoid closed, you had 2 batteries in parallel. It worked very well, a very good system. I did a video on this a while back. I'll put a link up in the upper right corner if you want to see more details on that. But one thing I didn't do at the time, and I had always wanted to do, was put all of these 12 volt lighter sockets onto the auxiliary battery. I had them on the primary battery, and I always meant to go back and hook them up to the auxiliary battery. So this summer, while I was working in the back of the 4Runner, I needed to take these out so I could get to the bed sides, and so I figured, well, while I have them out, I'll clean up the wiring, I'll hook them up to the auxiliary battery. And then I got to thinking, well, let's see, I need a fuse block, so I picked up one of these guys. It's like an 8 circuit fuse box here. You've got your DC input, and then you've got 8 loads, and it also does the voltage checking over, under, and normal voltage. I didn't have any voltmeter or anything in the back, and if I was going to be running a bunch of loads off that auxiliary battery, I figured it might be nice to have some sort of voltage indicator. So anyway, this dual battery system was set up mainly for 4-wheeling. Basically gives you the redundant battery, you can have a self jump start mode, you get the increased cranking amps, and I was able to put these 2 batteries under the truck and free up some room in the engine bay. I wanted to put everything on this auxiliary battery, which means I only have 26 amp hours, and these are lead acid AGM batteries, so you only want to run these to maybe 50% state of charge. So now you only have 13 amp hours usable capacity. But one thing I found with this setup that was a weakness is if I wanted to do a trip where I drove into some place and then parked the truck and maybe did a day hike and then came back to the truck that night. So that would mean I pulled in one night, powered the fridge and everything else overnight, then the truck sat there all day, and then I came back. I would come back to basically a dead battery because I couldn't leave everything plugged in. Along the way, I got the idea that I would really like to add a solar panel to this. So I was trying to figure out, how do I add a solar panel back here? Initially, I was just going to put it on the auxiliary battery, and I just couldn't come up with a really clean way of doing that. So what I came up with instead, so the red is my existing system, and I'm not going to touch it. It works fine, everything's very functional, but what I wanted to do was add a 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery as a house battery. So I would power everything in the back of the truck off of this battery. I would have a 20 amp charge controller here, a 200 watt solar panel on the roof of the 4Runner, and this way this whole thing here is like a solar generator. It charges the battery, powers all my DC loads. So the DC loads would be hooked up to this fuse block here, and my fridge would be plugged in here and all the other things. And with the solar panel, I could go away, leave the truck all day, and it would keep this battery charged. And then I could also rewire my 300 watt power inverter off of this battery directly and eliminate the 12 volt lighter plug. So I could actually get 300 watts out of my inverter. I'd run it through a circuit breaker. There'd be a circuit breaker on the 100 amp hour battery. And in the green here in the middle is how I want to control or interconnect the existing batteries to the house battery. And the purpose of all this is to give me flexibility on how I run the system. So there's going to be a circuit breaker here for the primary and the auxiliary battery, and then I'll have two relays here that work similar to the solenoid that I have on my dual batteries. So they'll run through the normally closed contacts on those relays through the breaker and connect in here to the lithium battery and charge controller. With these two relays, I'm also going to have two switches here that I can basically arm one or both relays so that when I turn the ignition on, the relay turns on. In normal mode, I would have this switch closed, maybe this switch closed, and then when I turn on the ignition, this relay and this relay turn on. The contacts open and it disconnects these two batteries from the house battery. And if I open one or both of these switches, then whichever relay the switch is on doesn't turn on and things stay connected. So I don't see using that feature very much, but I want to put that in there. And then with the circuit breakers, I can open the circuit breakers, and for instance, maybe I only want to connect the primary battery in here and keep the auxiliary battery isolated. So I can open this breaker here and the auxiliary battery will never connect. The primary battery will connect when the ignition is off, and it'll disconnect when the ignition is on. So that way, like if I'm running my stereo or my head unit off of the accessory power, that's coming off the primary battery, but I have this 100 amp hour battery in parallel, so I'm mostly running off of the lithium battery. So anyway, that's my plan going forward. So in upcoming videos, we'll look at putting the battery and charge controller in the truck, and then we'll get a solar panel installed, and then get some of this other stuff wrapped up. And probably the last thing I'll do is connect these two together. I want to get this all working by itself, because that's the whole idea, is I want everything from here over to be standalone. So this can work all by itself, and it doesn't have to affect this. In fact, if I open these two circuit breakers, the existing stuff here stays like it is, this stuff stays like it is, and there's basically no connection between the two. So yeah, stay tuned. We'll look at some of these in upcoming videos. If you have any questions or suggestions, post up in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching.